Our next presenter, I'm really pleased to introduce Chanda
Yes.
Rule with the Golden Rule Produce. So she's a producer out of Buffalo, Wyoming, and she is here to talk about getting the most from your crops, selection and timing for those crops.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm not sciencey, I'm not techie. I just do what works for me. I grew up in Ohio, and this is what it looks like in June. So that's not here at all. So I've had to adjust my growing and what works for me quite a bit. I'm a wife, a mother. My real job is I'm a bookkeeper. So keep in mind when I give my talk, I have that type A personality. I need control, I need lines, I need definition. My husband, we live just outside Buffalo. My husband and I built a house out on the family ranch about 22 years ago. But before we built the house, he put in a garden for me. So that's how much support I get from my family and my husband. Definitely a family effort. I was just talking to a gentleman outside. I have 3 kids, a junior in college, a sophomore in college, and a senior in high school. And they have been my workforce. But they've all left me. So I have to adjust how I work my systems and the labor. So it is a family operation for us. I put in my hoop house in 2012. So it's been 12 years already. I've replaced the cover on it 3 times. When we put it in, we put in a very good structure. It was concreted in the ground. We used the larger gauge steel. It was a very secure structure. That's not going anywhere. It's just the plastic that I have to replace. And I'm supposed to talk about what I grow and the timing and what works for me and tricks and trades. So what I grow in the hoop house, I have some early season stuff, and that's lettuce, greens, mustards, arugula, herbs, and kale. And then a little bit later, I'll put beets in. And I'll go through these things one at a time, but just to give you an idea what I grow. And then I also grow my warm-loving plants. Tomatoes, peppers, tomatillos, cucumbers, eggplants, beans, and different herbs. What I don't grow in the hoop house is squash. I have tried summer squash, but I have a hard time with powdery mildew. And it takes up so much space. My hoop house is 96 by 30. So it's good size, but when you're trying to grow squash or some of those bigger plants, they grow just as well outside. Yeah, you might get production a couple weeks later, but they seem to do better outside. I don't grow corn in my hoop house. Again, the space requirements. Corn typically needs a large amount of it to pollinate and do well. And I don't have any luck with fall crops. Maybe it's because I'm tired and my kids are all back at school and I don't work hard enough to get them to work, but I don't grow fall crops in my hoop house either. I also don't grow a lot of the cool season. Cabbage, onions, garlic, carrots, those I plant outside. I have an outside garden as well, and those I use the space outside to grow. So seed selection and planting. And where you get your seeds is a personal choice by far. I have even gone to, the ag stores, the hardware stores, co-op, and gotten the end of season seeds, and they've all germinated well for me. So that's just a particular choice. 3 catalogs that I do use though, Totally Tomatoes. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but they have every variety of tomato you could ever want. There is, I grow a yellow tomato. They're smaller, but they're early season. They're called taxi, and this is the only place I can find those seeds. I also use Morgan County seeds, and I don't remember how I found these companies, but I do typically buy my seed in bulk. So I'm talking like an ounce of seed instead of, 50 seeds. Morgan County seeds and Jordan seeds have a pretty good price on these. They've been good to work with. There's no pictures in the catalog. There's no fancy anything, but I've had good luck with germination and the prices are really good. So those are where I get my seeds. I will grab Johnny's catalog because they have those beautiful pictures and all those wonderful descriptions, but then I'll go through and find, the same variety of the seed in a bulk package at a more reasonable rate. So that's where I purchase most of my seeds.
And they last longer. I mean, you say that you buy them in a larger quantity.
I will use seeds 5 6 years. I store them. I have a root cellar in my house, and I'll store them in the root cellar. But I don't do anything particular, and I've had good germination rate on everything. The next thing I do after I order my seeds and I'm getting ready to plant my garden is I have a map of my whole garden. This is a map of my hoop house, and my kids know what row's what. They're just numbered. Up there where the year is, that's the little door that I come in, and I have a big door right under the hoop house. I have another big door here, and I have 2 roll-up sides. I do have a picture of my hoop house here that I'll show you in a bit. But I plan how I'm going to plant everything. I do a lot of crop rotation. So like last year, I had tomatoes in these 2 rows. So this year, I don't like to weed. So I use a lot of black plastic, and I'll show you that as well. But this row was covered with black plastic. So I'm able to direct sow some seeds, and I won't have as much weeding to do because it had black plastic and was covered the year before. So before I start planting, I'll line out my garden. This I already have planted in the ground. That's why it's written in ink. But this year, this will be tomatoes. I'm doing cucumbers here. These will be more tomatoes and peppers, and then these will be my beans and whatever else I decide to plant. So I plan where everything is going before, and the same with the outside garden. That way I can kind of schedule my son to do the rototilling for me when he's home on weekends, and I can plan when I need things rototilled and the beds ready to plant. Okay, I warned you guys I was a bookkeeper. Spreadsheets, I have lots of spreadsheets. This is my seed starting schedule. Write lots of notes, dates I want to start. HH is hoop house, OS is outside. I mean, nothing's really high tech. But this is kind of my target date. And we live in Wyoming, so we never know if it's going to snow in April, or if it's going to snow in May, or if it's going to snow in June. So these are estimates. You know, if we had the perfect season, this is when I would start all my plants. You can see that the peppers are going to be the first one. And like I said, I'll go through each vegetable plant individually. But that's kind of how I plan and get organized. And then, of course, I have the same thing for when I actually plant in the hoop house. And you can tell that I have some stuff started in there, the date it was started. I'm not so well at this part of the spreadsheet, but it kind of gives me an idea. And I keep, again, bookkeeper, sorry, but I keep everything. You know, I have this binder that has the previous year, so I can go back and see, like I said, I rotate my crops in the hoop house. I can go back and see what I planted where, which year, and I have it written down so I can keep track of it. Okay, so this is my hoop house. Sorry I didn't have that sooner. Just a little bit how I lay it out. Again, type A, I need rows. So these are just 2x6s. This is my planting area, obviously, and these are my path. One thing that helps with is compaction. Because I only walk in the paths, I do not have to spend that much time working up my beds to use them before each year. The plastic needs replaced, but you know, you track through there so the weeds stay down anyhow. The different plastics I use a couple different materials. So this is, what is it? 6 millimeter, 0.6 millimeter plastic. And this is what is in my beds. My beds are 3 feet wide. Lo and behold, this plastic comes in rolls that are 3 feet wide. Wow. So what I do is I just take and unroll the roll and I staple it to the sides, just a hand stapler, which keeps it, you know, you don't have as much wind in the hoop house, but when you do open it, you do get some breeze. But that holds my plastic down. So we just unroll the roll and staple it down, and now it's ready to plant. The other material that's in there, I said where I need to replace it, is this landscape fabric. And this is a woven fabric. You can find this in all different degrees, quality. This stuff lasts probably, even outside, it'll last 5-6 years uncovered. And I get it from my conservation district. They sell it in 6 feet rolls by 300 feet for $50. And I use the conservation district down in Buffalo. But this is how I outline my beds, and I use it outside too. So these are my walking paths where I have this stuff. And again, it's just ground staples. I didn't bring any of those, but the 6-inch ground staples, just plug that in. Irrigation, you can't see it on these beds. I have another picture where it shows, but I use the T-tape or the drip tubing. Have you guys ever seen this stuff? 1,000-foot rolls that comes in. Each of these beds have two, you can kind of see where the plastic is sticking to it. Each of these beds have 2 rolls of this, or two strips of this. And then each bed has a valve. So I can water this bed, I can water this bed and this bed, or I can water the whole hoop house at once. So everything has a valve on it with this T-tape or drip tape tubing. You can get this a lot of places. DripWorks, there's another one, drip irrigation. I mean, search up drip irrigation. You can find this millions of different places. That's my setup. Like I said, these beds are ready to plant. These will be my warm season, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, that kind of thing. I direct sow some things. That spreadsheet had the things already planted. That's going to be my lettuces, my mustards, my arugula, spinach, cilantro, and dill are the ones that I direct sow early in the season. And this is what they look like. I just took this picture the other day. You can see my irrigation system, and you can see where, like I said, it's a drip system, so every 6 inches there's a little emitter, and that's where the water comes out. They're kind of planted in rows. I have a 4-row planter. I actually got it, I think, from Johnny's. It just has little compartments and a wheel. And I just use that to plant my greens. Those I typically I put in the ground depending on the weather. You know, the soil has to be not frozen, and it has been frozen before in March in Buffalo. You guys here at Sheridan are about a week ahead of us in Buffalo. Your growing season is about a week ahead of us, and typically, not just this year, maybe 2. You guys have lilacs way before we do. So mid-March is usually when I put those outside. I will probably start harvesting these 30 to 40 days, so mid to late April. And when you harvest lettuce, a lot of these greens, you can just cut them because they will grow back. I usually have greens until about June, July. It gets hot and I start getting bugs, cabbage worms and aphids and that kind of thing. So and it starts to get a little bitter. So I strictly grow my greens early season. The next thing that I direct sow is beans. And there are several types of beans that I grow. I grow both the bush and the pole. And has anybody ever grown Orient beans, or what do they call them, asparagus beans, or yard-long green beans? Have you guys ever seen those things? They get about this long and they curl. They're kind of cool. Those will be the 3 type of beans I grow. I will plant them in one of those beds that have plastic. So I will cut slits right along the T-tape, and I'll stagger them. So I'll have about 2 foot long strip, and then staggered and all the way down. And I'll plant my beans in there. My bush beans is how I'll plant those. Pole beans, I will do different. I cut a hole. I plant in hills, so I'll drop 8 to 10 bean seeds in there. And then once those start to grow, okay, rebar is your friend in a hoop house. I will take 3 pieces of rebar, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but I have 2 different gauges, these thicker ones and the thinner ones. For the pole beans, these thinner ones are fine. And you can get your hardware store to cut these at the various lengths for you. These are probably 7 feet, 6.5. But I will make a teepee out of it, tie it, or put wire here, and this is the support for my pole bean. You have to train them a little bit, but they will grow up through the top. And I'll use rebar again, so I'll leave this here to explain it. But that's how I grow and support my beans. Those, I usually don't start those until a little bit later because they can't take a frost. My hoop house will give me about a month earlier than I can plant outside. So beans you could probably put in a week or so before the last frost outside because it'll take them that long to germinate. So our last frost date in Buffalo is May 31st. What is it for Sheridan? Is it the same? Even though you guys do get that extra week, I swear you do. So I will plant my beans in the hoop house around May 1st. So that'll give me a month before the last frost outside. The other thing that I grow direct seed in the hoop house is beets. But what I will do, like I said, my lettuce crop is done June, early July. So I will pull that out and I will get another season out of this bed. I will then plant my beets and I just direct sow those by hand in that bed after the greens are pulled out. So that, like I said, that's gonna be end of June, 1st of July, and I'll get a crop out of them before the year. I also grow beets outside, so I do get an earlier crop of beets, but they're outside, and outside I plant in the next few weeks, probably 1st of April or so. And then I grow some herbs, and I direct sow my herbs as well. Cilantro and dill can take the cold and the frost. So I plant those with my greens. They're already planted, and they're up about this far as well. The other herb that I grow, that I direct sow is basil. But basil is one of those that cannot take any cold at all. So that doesn't get planted until May 1st, about the same time I do the green beans. But I plant it the same way I would my greens. So those are the only seeds I direct sow in the hoop house. Everything else, I start my own plants and I grow those in the house. And I'll show you some of the supplies when starting my own plants. This is the first tray I use. Fill it with soil, sprinkle my seeds, and I have I put in maybe 90 tomato plants, which is a large amount, but it's not huge, so I can hand do all this and hand transplant and that kind of thing. But to save seeds, I will, like I said, fill this with soil and then plant my tomato variety in there. Once they germinate, I will transplant them, but that works best for me instead of taking my growing tray and putting 3 seeds in here and then 2 of them germinate and then I have to throw one away. So that's kind of one way that I conserve on the seeds and the seedlings. This is my growing rack. This is in the house. A cheap setup, guys. This is a Home Depot shelf. These are cheap fluorescent lights, Home Depot lights, and I have them on chains with a little hook so I can raise them and lower them closer and farther from the plants. Down here, you can't really see it, but I do have a heat mat, and most of my seeds, I start by germinating them on that. So this little tray will start out like this on the bottom rack. Plastic to keep in the humidity. Tray underneath so water doesn't drip when I'm carrying it from my kitchen sink to my plant rack. And then my seedling tray. And then once they germinate, I fill this with potting soil. And I was just talking to the gentleman, again, no science, what works for me. I was talking to the gentleman out there, he asked what I use for potting soil. I use the cheap potting soil from Ace Hardware. So even to start my seeds, and I've tried, the seed starting material, and I don't seem to have any different outcome. So I just use the stuff that I get at Ace. I fill these all with soil. I take this. This is going to be your favorite tool. This is a chopstick. You can just dig out your little seedling, make a hole, stick it in there, and pack it around. So these are my pepper plants as of yesterday. Okay, so this is my kale and my parsley. This was started in the seed trays on February 19th, and I just planted them in the garden yesterday. So I used that same system to start these. I do grow a little bit of head lettuce, and that's what these are, and they were started the same time, so mid-February. And again, they were just transplanted to the hoop house yesterday.
You put a timer on your lights?
I do, and again, not scientific. I was talking to the gentleman out at Papa Joe's. They use red lights and blue lights and timers and daylight to daylight, 7 in the morning to 7 at night. And as long as they are in the house, I'm getting, good enough growth to transplant. No, I do think they need a period of darkness to, yeah.
And they're just the fluorescent lights.
Yep.
They're not, because I've tried that setup before and they got really spindly. And
Keep moving the lights. Get them as close as you can to the plant and then move them as they grow.
lights are quite a bit more expensive
Yeah.
than fluorescent.
Yeah, And you saw I had quite a few lights on there. I mean, there's 4 fluorescent lights. So there's 8 bulbs there, but again, they're fluorescent bulbs that are cheap. I hope we're still able to get them. And the light fixture is a cheap setup. But the chain and moving them as close, you can see how close these are. They're almost touching. So that helps them from getting spindly. And I only have stuff in here a month to 6 weeks. If you're gonna have them, if you're gonna start earlier, then they will get more leggy. Okay, so like I said, these are my peppers. I started on March 10th this year. If you're growing hot peppers, habaneros, serranos, any of those kind of things, they take a lot longer. These are just, I grow bells and I do grow jalapenos. These are probably my jalapenos, and they're a little bit behind. I should have started those probably 2 weeks earlier. But if you're growing any of the hot peppers, you probably want to start those mid-February. And these won't go to the garden until that May 1st, May 15th deadline, depending on what our weather and our weather forecast is looking like. I start them all exactly the same way with the system there. These are my tomatoes, and they were started a couple weeks later. So they were started 3/18, I guess just a week later. I also start tomatillos and eggplant at the same time. Cucumbers. These are my cucumbers. And you see this is a little different setup. Gardeners are great recyclers. Anybody buy wine in the mail? These are perfect for starting cucumbers. When they get wet, when this tray gets wet, I can squish it, and lo and behold, it fits perfectly in my little tray. I will just fill these things up with soil and put my cucumber seeds in. The reason I do this is cucumbers, squash, some plants don't like to have their roots messed with it at all. So when I go to plant these, when they're wet, this just falls right apart. I can just tear that apart. I tear off the top part because I don't want moisture wicking out of the ground when I plant it. But again, it just tears off. I dig a little hole and then I plant this whole thing. So I'm never touching the cucumber roots. So they seem to transplant a little better. My cucumbers in the hoop house, and again, I grow these outside too, so I kind of have a succession. But the cucumbers in the hoop house, I will start April 1st. These were started actually May 30th. But that's what they look like yesterday. I grow 3 different varieties of cucumbers that have worked well for me. Just to back up a little bit, I have a small self-serve produce stand down in Buffalo. It's an honor box system. So I grow a lot of what I sell. People love cucumbers, but the varieties that I sell are Market More, which is just a slicing cucumber, which you'll find in the grocery store. I sell pickling cucumbers, and that variety changes. Boston pickler, that's a good one. Just a pickle cucumber is what I'll grow. And then the third variety that I grow is a lemon cucumber. Has anybody ever grown, eaten lemon? They make great pickles too, by the way. But those are the 3 varieties of pickles that I will grow and sell at my hoop house. When I grow my cucumbers, I will have a whole row of cucumbers. and I have 2 trays at home, so that's not quite enough to grow my or to fill that row of cucumbers. So every other hill will be direct sowed, and that kind of staggers the production a little bit. And to direct sow, I do it just like I do the beans. I cut the hole, I drop 6 to 8 seeds in there, cover it back up. When I plant my cucumbers in the hoop house, same thing. I cut the hole in the plastic, I tear off the top of that cardboard, dig a little hole, and stick the cucumbers down in there. My support system for the cucumbers is a little different. This is concrete wire. You know, you can get the big, I don't know, 100, 200 foot rolls at your Home Depot. A pair of bolt cutters, and you can cut it. These are 7 holes. And then you just wrap it up and hook it. I cut off the bottom row of wire, and that's the stakes to stick it in the ground. So I just shove that in the ground, and my cucumbers grow. You kind of have to train them. In my hoop house, obviously, horizontal space is at a premium. So anything I can get to grow vertically, I'm going to get more production out of. The cucumbers will grow out the top of this. Back to the rebar. I told you there was 2 different gauges. I used this heavier gauge. How close am I to lights? I don't want to take anything out. Okay, so I'll put that in the ground. I have a high arching system. Shove this down here close to the edge and jam this in the ground as far as I can. That gives you a little extra support so the cage won't fall over. And that's how I grow my cucumbers. First production on them, July. I have everything planted. It's May 1st. Ooh, weather forecast. We are going to get another cold snap. It's going to get down to 28 degrees. One thing I can do to help protect my plants, these are row covers. I don't have to worry about hooking those down because they're in the hoop house, there's no wind. And I didn't take a very good picture, but you can tell there's hoops here. So there's a thin piece of wire that's about this long, 4 feet long, 5 feet long. My wood frame helps support that. So I just make a hoop, and then you can put out these row covers. They give me about a 2 to 4 degree cushion. So if they're calling for cold snap, or even at night, honestly, at night, as soon as I put my tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers in, I will put these row covers over every night. And you just flip them off. So it takes, 30 seconds to do that. But that will give you a couple extra degrees if the weather's not cooperating. Okay, tomatoes. Like I said, that is by far my biggest seller. I had 96 tomato plants last year, and I could not keep my stand stocked. I grow those little yellow taxis that I talked about. Those are early season, and again, not scientific, but the type of tomato plant that doesn't grow tall. What is that? Determinate or indeterminate? I always get them mixed up. Indeterminate are the short ones. Okay, that's what taxis are. So when I transplant my tomato plant, I wiggle it out of the tray, squeeze it, wiggle it out. And tomato roots like to be messed with. They like to be transplanted, so I kind of break it up. I have my row here that's ready to plant. Plastic is already down. My husband, again, family operation, built me a planter. He took some scrap. I don't even know what he had. But it's just got a plug on it and steps. So I can put 3 tomato plants in between those supports. So I take this, step on it as far down as I can go in the ground. My tomatoes will probably be about this tall by the time I'm ready to transplant them. So I step and plant as far down as I can. In that hole, I will throw in a tum. I have a problem with blossom end rot. I don't get a lot of leaching in my hoop house because it's a closed system. So I have high salts. So I will throw in a Tums. I will throw in some Epsom salt. And then if I have a jug of fish fertilizer or Anything else around, I'll dump a little bit of that in there, in the bottom of that hole. I've wiggled my tomato plant out of there, and then I drop it in the hole as far as it'll go. So I'll probably just have this much of the top of the plant sticking out, just a few leaves. Then I cover it up and go to the next one. When the tomatoes start...
Salt you just put in plain, you don't mix it first.
Nope, I just dump it in there.
But you add like a tablespoon or do you just?
It depends on which one of my kids is on that task. Depends on how much is in there. But yeah, a tablespoon.
What else were you putting in with it, with the Epsom salt?
An antacid.
And then how far apart do you suggest that you put in plants?
Okay, I try to get as much horizontal space out. These are, I'm trying to think how far apart my spacing is. Tomato plant's about 1.5 feet apart. So I plant them pretty close. When they start growing, okay, I have tried everything to support tomatoes. Everything. I've tried this setup. The plant falls over. I have tried putting hog panels. Sorry, I'm going to trip over this if I don't move it. I've tried putting hog panels with fence posts. I have tried I've 5 different systems. This works. My husband, again, built me these racks, just leftover pipe. But the neat thing about this, you can't tell, but this is one support system there, but in between this and the next one is just a pipe. So that pipe slides in and out, so I can just move this section. And then that pipe goes in, but it gives me support so I can grow there, and so on. So I think in a 96-foot row, there would be 1, 2, maybe 8 of those, but I have double the space because I have that removable pipe. Okay, again, high tech. The support system is baler twine. And I prune my tomato plants, probably kind of funny, but I will prune off all the bottom leaves. And then I will take 2 leaders, stems, and you can see I just loop the baler twine over there, and there's, well, you can see it there, there's two strands. I take these vine clips. Have you guys ever seen or used these? They have little teeth in the back. That clips on to the twine so it doesn't slide, and then this just clips and goes around the plant. As my plants grow, I just keep pulling up the branches and clipping them. I have a couple varieties. Those are 8 feet tall. I have a couple varieties that'll grow to the top of those.
Tamara, so the terminate plants are the ones that don't continue to grow.
On this system, I grow, which ones? The determinate. And the varieties that I grow there are going to be big beef. Those are the nice, pretty beefsteak tomatoes that everybody likes. Those are by far my best seller. I probably have 75 plants just of those. I also grow a couple heirloom varieties, Prudence Purple and Cherokee Purple I've had good luck with. And they will grow tall and are supported this way as well. I also grow a few cherries. I found a variety last year of the red cherries. I don't have the name in front of me, but they're the more the oblong shaped. Those were interdeterminate. Determinate. See, I can't remember that. And those and the taxis, I was able to support with this system. They didn't need to be that high, so I took the cage and I cut it in half. So I got 2 cages out of this. And again, my rebar was, 4 feet instead of 7 feet. But the same system that I used for the cucumbers. Shove this in the ground, support it with rebar, you train your tomato plant up through there. They didn't get any higher than waist high, that charity variety and the taxis. So you're just able to train them, and that supports that. Johnny's are gonna have them, these seed catalogs that I use, I think they have them as well. I'm sorry. What do you call them? Vine clips. Yep. And I can pass these around if you guys want to see them. They're pretty slick. Tomatillas. They get pretty tall too, but they're not as heavy as a tomato, so I can support them with this system as well. But I do keep the taller cage. Again, train it up through. Peppers. I also plant peppers the same way I would a tomato. I drop in the calcium, I drop in the Epsom salt. I dig my hole down as far as I can so I have this much of the plant sticking out. And then I will put a half cage on these like I do the tomatoes. And that just gives my pepper plant a support. When the peppers get heavy, you know, they're easier to pick. Same with cucumbers. Cucumbers are much easier to pick when they're hanging right here in front of your eyes instead of having to pick up vines and find them. I did bring a sample of this. This is my row cover cloth. I'll pass all these things around if you guys want to see them. This is the plastic in the beds, and this is the landscape fabric. This is the drip system. So this is what my tomatoes will look like.
Do you add any other fertilizers?
Everything is on a drip system, so I can run fertilizer through. And again, not high tech, Miracle Grow, whatever I have. I do send some calcium through, because I do have, Wyoming thing. And when I first started doing this, I used a lot of composted manure, which are high in salts. And even if the calcium is there, from what I've researched, it doesn't allow the salt intake, or the calcium intake, the salt blocks that. So I do run some calcium through. And again,
Right through the plastic.
yep.
But not, the one picture you showed of your lettuce, that was just, there was no plastic.
Correct. Because that is, I do those in my planter. I don't have any pictures of the lettuce and stuff when it was mature, but it just fills up that whole bed. You can't really tell, but like I said, I plant my tomatoes like trees. I trim off the bottom 2 feet of leaves, and then I have 2 leaders, so you can see where the twine there is separated to support two pieces of the plant. I do buy those clips by the thousands because I'm always clipping them up.
You can use whatever ties you've got.
Oh, heck yeah.
Tie,
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, I just found that those go on pretty quick because it's just a clip.
so instead of like using
Yep,
twist ties or
yep,
something.
yep. When I clean out my garden, though, they get worn out, so you can't really recycle them. So they're just a one-season use for me. And I think that was all the slides I had. Yep, I do have some wider beds, but you can get that same 0.6 mil plastic in 6 foot, 5 foot, 4 foot widths. And again, I staple them down so it doesn't blow away in the wind.
So can you get that from your conservation district?
No, they don't have the plastic, but I've gotten it from Amazon. Both of those catalogs, I think, also freight sometimes eat your lunch getting it here. Did I cover everything? I think that's all I grow in my hoop house. Eggplant, I plant the same as peppers. The pole beans I've discussed. The beets I put in later. But everything else I grow outside. Cabbage, onions, carrots, chard. A second batch of cucumbers, a second batch of pole beans, potatoes, squash. I grow a lot of squash, but that's all outside.
Thank you for watching a University of Wyoming Extension Office presentation. And thank you to our sponsors and partners.